Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Well, beyond the fence. I'm gonna take a freight train down at the station, Lord. I don't care where it goes. Gonna climb a mountain, the highest mountain. I'll jump off, nobody gonna know. The Marshall Tucker Band. I'm so angry. I did my best. I really did. That road from the army base where we live now, running out west towards that looted Costo outlet near Corvallis, is littered with abandoned cars and trucks, all rusting out, tires flat, gas tank lids and caps open. I know all the places where you have to go off-road to get around them, but there are always things you just can't predict. The law of unintended consequences, they call it. That's what happened to me, I guess. I became an unintended consequence. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. I'm not thinking very clearly right now. Molly, too, my Staffordshire Terrier. She was an unintended consequence as well, maybe. I guess. I felt worse about her in the end, honestly. I loved Molly so much. Those little fuckers. I hate them so much. And now I am them. The old Toyota 4Runner was running pretty smooth despite the degraded quality of the fuel that was left to us, and it only bogged down on me a few times during the drive, but never stalled out. When I reached the parking lot, I came to a stop by the loading docks, like always. I grabbed the cut-down Remington 12-gauge and stuffed the box of pumpkin balls into my jacket pocket. Normally, I would have left the driver's side door open, but I had to keep Molly inside. I certainly wasn't bringing her in there. The rear door to the Costco was still propped open, just like it always is, and I found the battered old orange hand truck sitting right there in the corner, just like it always is. Things looked much as they always did. I couldn't hear anything, but I still kept the shotgun pointed directly ahead of me as I entered the store floor from the back room. I clicked on the small flashlight mounted to the barrel with some electrical tape and squinted into the darkness. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I entered. I left the hand truck right there and proceeded very slowly. It was my turn to do this today, and I never argued against it when my turn came. But Kaylee was my only remaining child, and I had to get back to her. I was in no big rush. I simply had to do my job and get back. I'm just so angry now. I really messed this up. I took a can of baked beans off the closest shelf and threw it as far as I could down one of the aisles, and then I shuffled back a few steps to see what would happen, listening for the sound of footsteps, ready to run if there were too many. I heard nothing. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I moved forward. A short time later, I had the first load of supplies stacked up on the hand truck. I left it there and checked the back room again with the flashlight beam on my shotgun, and then checked the back parking lot for a moment just to make sure everything was cool out there too. Seeing nothing of concern, I hauled the first load of supplies out and loaded them into the back of the 4Runner as quietly as possible. When I returned, I took all of the same precautions, I made no assumptions. But again, everything seemed clear, so I went ahead and gathered up the rest of the supplies. In the end, I had canned foods, batteries, bottled water and juice, toilet paper, napkins, Tylenol, garbage bags, t-shirts, vitamins, and a few other things. There wasn't very much left at that Costco by that point, but we didn't go much further into the more previously populated urban areas until it became truly necessary. Again, I checked the back room and the parking lot before I hauled the hand truck out through the loading dock door and placed everything in the back of the old Toyota SUV as quietly as possible. Then I heard the sound of something being knocked over, coming through the rear door of the Costco outlet. It sounded metallic, maybe a bucket or a garbage pail being tipped over, or something like that. I pointed my shotgun in that direction for a second, and then jumped into the driver's seat of the Toyota and drove off. I had what I came for, and Molly was barking like crazy. It would take at least 5 or 6 hours, maybe more, to get back to the base, and I had already traveled at least that same amount of time, just getting there earlier that day. I would definitely have to refuel from the tanks in the back soon. I was ready to push on through, but when it started raining, I knew it would take much longer, and it would be much more dangerous. I had to rethink my plans. I knew a place. It was more important that I just got back to Kaylee than getting back right away. I knew she would be scared if I didn't return that night, but that's obviously better than not returning at all. My sister Amy would comfort her as much as possible. I wasn't looking forward to my night either, but Amy would take care of her until I got there with the supplies. Like I said, I knew a place. It was just past a highway exit sign for Langhorne Avenue. That sign has a red letter X spray painted across it. Everyone knows what that means. Just past that exit, along the side of the road just before you reach Redmond, there is a little sleep spot we sometimes use when we have to. It is proven safe. It used to be a small electrical substation, just a little 8x12 steel structure, about 10 feet tall, that once housed some power transmission equipment. At some point, someone gutted it out, and you can still see the old components rusting there, just outside of the door, the tall grass growing up through the cracks. I pulled the Toyota around in front of that old substation, but I kept the engine running, and I stayed inside for a little while and used my binoculars to search the surrounding area for signs of movement. The sky was gray and the sun was setting, but I saw nothing of concern. So eventually I grabbed the shotgun and my travel bag and got out of the SUV as cautiously and quietly as possible. I left the driver's side door open, despite the light rain. I didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and if I needed to make a quick escape, that could make the difference. Once Molly and I were inside that old substation, I quickly closed the door behind me and dropped the zip-tie bundled rebar bolts into place. Then I stood there by the door for a while, holding my shotgun, but I didn't hear anything outside, and eventually I relaxed a bit. They don't like the rain, but you never really know. The filthy old mattress was a welcome sight. I sat there as I ate a cold can of Chef Boyardee raviolis. They were so delicious, and I took my time. It was a treat. I had dog food and water for Molly, too. She was happy as well. Afterwards, I laid my sleeping bag out on the mattress, and Molly and I fell asleep to the fading sound of rain pattering off the steel roof. It was nice. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of Molly's growling and barking. She was standing by the door, and I could hear the sounds of screaming and scratching coming from the other side. I grabbed my shotgun and pulled Molly back, breathing heavily, hoping the door would hold. I checked the rebar bolts. The door seemed solid. After a while, the rain picked up. The violent sounds coming from outside faded away, and then I set the shotgun down and returned to the bed. It was hard to find sleep again. I stared up into the darkness for a while. It was just over 3 years ago when it all began. A facility in the woods of northern Montana where they housed and performed tests on children who had been exposed to experimental biochemical weapons in various locations around the world. Things were fine there until they were not. The confused and sometimes conflicting news reports at the time mostly said that there was an antivirus that was administered to those kids on a daily basis. But one day the supplies ran out. Then, by the next morning, that facility was overrun. Blood and gore. The fences went down. But what no one knew until then was that it was contagious. Most people past the age of adolescence quickly succumb to it, but not everyone. No one really knows why. It all happened very quickly, and then it was all over, and I mean all of it. Everything. The world is very different now. This part of the world, anyway. I really don't know what it's like elsewhere. We don't receive news reports anymore. I eventually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later with Molly cuddled up by my side. I fed her some kibble for breakfast, and then I ate a granola bar and drank a bottle of water and packed up my gear. I looked out through the 2 small peepholes before leaving the safety of the substation with Molly by my side. The rain had stopped, but it was still gray and cloudy. I guess I made a little too much noise unbolting and opening the door. As soon as we stepped outside, I heard the clattering from behind the substation and on the low rooftop overhead. They must have just waited out there all night. I didn't know they were capable of that. I thought they just retreated back into the woods once they quit the hunt. Molly paid the price, not me. I hate myself for that. I hate myself. When they pounced, I fired my shotgun twice and blasted 2 of them in the chest and put them down. Both teenage boys, stark naked and filthy, with elongated nails and teeth, long straggly hair, moving with predatory speed. Unfortunately, there were 3 more who fell on Molly, 2 adults and a kid. I was about to take another shot, but they were all over her. And trust me, she was fighting back like a fucking monster. But I just saw no way to not hit her as well. After a few seconds, I realized she would soon be dead anyway, so I just unloaded my remaining 4 shells and killed them all, including Molly. I was so angry, but I started crying right away. I'm still enraged. They made me kill Molly, those little fuckers. As I was making my way to the driver's side door of the Toyota with my head down and staring at the grass through my tear-blurred vision, that's when the last one got me. He was just a little kid, maybe 10 years old. Perhaps that's why he held back when the others rushed in. I don't know. Who can say? Who knows how they think? I guess I will know soon enough. It's already starting. He came around from the back of the lift gate and dove at me and bit me on my forearm. There was only the one quick bite before I turned around and smashed him in the forehead with the butt of my Remington. But as soon as I got into the forerunner and closed the door, I could see that he had drawn blood. I wiped it off with my bandana and poured some rubbing alcohol on it. I was scared, but I still had some hope. I had my fingers crossed, but I still had some hope. That hope faded quickly along the drive back to the base. I feel sick now. I feel very sick, and it's just getting worse. My head is starting to pound, and I feel like I might need to vomit. My teeth and gums and my fingernails and toenails are all starting to ache. My vision is changing, and my throat is dry. I'm starting to make some involuntary growling sounds, and I cannot stop gripping the steering wheel with all of the strength in my hands. I want to just get out of the Toyota and run. It doesn't even matter where. I was planning to just drop off these supplies by the front gates of the base and then leave. but it's still at least a 2-hour drive, and I am afraid of who or what I will be by the time I get there. I think I have to just turn around right now and drive in the opposite direction for as long as I possibly can. I have reloaded the Remington, and I am keeping it handy. I am sweating and drooling pretty hard now. I can't help it. My clothes are also starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I think I might need to pull over and remove my shirt and boots soon. Maybe my jeans too. I don't think I can take this too much longer. I keep looking at the woods along the side of the road. I just want to run off into the trees. I want to scream. I want to eat something while it is still breathing. Mostly, I just want to end this before it gets worse. I know that I will never see Kaylee again, and even more than what happened to Molly, that's what makes me feel so sick. I'm sure my sister Amy will take good care of her, but still, I just feel so sick. I keep looking at the woods and at the Remington. I just have to keep driving for a little bit longer now. The radio stations all went dark years ago, and there's only one stupid old CD stuck inside the dashboard stereo in this Toyota for me to listen to as I drive, the Marshall Tucker Band. So I turn it up. What else am I going to do? The hum of the motor is hurting my head, and the lyrics seem right. I'm gonna find me a hole in the wall. I'm gonna crawl inside and die. But no, I don't think so. That would be too easy. I think I'm gonna die with my boots on, and I'm definitely gonna bring some of you little bastards with me. Get ready to eat some of these 12-gauge pumpkin balls. It's not going to be pretty. I'm gonna cut some of you little demons in half while I still can. As many of you as possible until my ammo runs out. I owe that much to Kaylee and Molly and Amy and all of the others. I see a red letter X spray painted on the exit sign up ahead. I'll be there soon. You'll know when I arrive, you little fuckers. Trust me, you'll know. O unholy night. Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singing's not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father, and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek. I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid. and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, The throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly, casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting brougham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers regardless. My initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fog lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudavik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings, he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. Diary of a Serial Killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear. Enter a deep cave. And dream, dream, dream. Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card, obvs, but life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized. Before. No, better yet, the before, because now life was rent in two, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after. A fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay. That drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him. Not from me. They gave her the code name Mama Bear. But he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night, alone. common sense, and the FBI handbook, would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst. But he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny. They were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet, crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office. This one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month. Or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day, one day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy. But that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied gyp-goff hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall, that last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister, quoting Anne Shirley. Not so long ago, his smile fell. Not so long ago, yet forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy, the ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs, like Scorpio, like her. You'd think one was enough, but it wasn't. I realized AA, alcoholic asshole, was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score. But what of the other moms? So many blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. So in 99, he considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people. Metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's, the original one, he wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart. Many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, up, up he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again, he read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged deanery page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea to write things down. But writers write. Fish swim, birds fly, dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs. No one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. Meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized, the cave. He could see the entrance. Dark, yawning, an inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead so as not to blind him. Hey, sis. Hey, bro. What took you so long? Frayed edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention a second after he stood. Or, more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. What is wrong with me? He wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. Why am I so on edge? Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep.
Time.
Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blessed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. "Is somebody there?" he saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. No, 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 no! He panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut, he thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again. Then bang. And his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No. I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched. He'd been sitting at his desk, drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters, painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe, the penultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because, by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. "Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife." "Not anymore." True. And given the insides of her skull, confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, "Hello, Peter," said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout. But the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. Peter, what the hell? She just showed up, he said with a shrug. What do you want from me? Right, said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. Gather round. Family meeting time. Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. Are you even part of our family anymore? Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. Soph, Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost? She's obviously a zombie, Eileen snapped. I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen? No. Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real. Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie, Eileen pouted. I am a revenant. Peter and Eileen shared a look. What's a revenant? He asked. I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell, told you lawyers went to hell? Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. Thing is, Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too. But not until. She took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy. Peter looked at his paper and gulped. Is this written in blood? It's Lucifer ink. By Lucifer Inc., Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though. Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. What if we don't sign? Eileen asked. Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again? Peter asked. Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise. Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. What kind of pen is that? Asked Eileen. A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk. What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble. What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a wed glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish. And if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it? So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. Maybe someone else would want to watch something, Eileen said. Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV, Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. You mind turning that down at night? Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. It's just, I can't sleep. Yes, Peter, said Sophie. I do mind. And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends, understandably, kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing, explaining themselves over and over, and stressing that the living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. "This isn't working for me," Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. "This isn't how I pictured our early retirement." Peter nodded again. "Are you listening to me?" "Christ, yes. What do you want from me?" "I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract. Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing. Whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard, what with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead." "Super. So very encouraging." "Shh. Wait. There's more." Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. "Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the Revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else." Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. "What do you suppose that means?" "I guess," Eileen hedged, "if one of us were to die, then..." Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry, and they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her, a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry, holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. "I think we should see other people," he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. "It's not you, it's me," she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. "Truce," he wheezed. "Yeah," she managed, and then coughed. "I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one." "Hey, do you smell that?" Eileen sniffed. "Is something burning?" Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. "Oh, hell," he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight. Neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. "Damn it," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "You two are just the worst." And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. 28 sleighs later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming, hold your horses. But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob? The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. What? He grunted. Let go of me. The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. Get out! Get out! The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds. like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. Jesus, 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 he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts, as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. Groovy, Santa bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege. Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me. Santa raised one gloved finger. Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty. He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eaten is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth.